What's up, sons? It's Blind Red with Son of a Tech once again, and today we have a new announcement from Bitmain. It actually came out yesterday on April 16th that we will be getting a new altcoin miner. This is most likely due to the fact that we have the Bitcoin halving coming up in a couple days. As you can see here on the nice hash countdown, we have 2 days, 1 hour and 55 minutes at the time of recording for the actual halving to take place, which is going to be a reduction of the reward on the base block reward for Bitcoin that gets paid out to miners in half. So we're going to go from the 6.25 to the 3.27, that sort of thing, or 3.15. Right? Something like that. Anyways, from 6 to 3 Bitcoin, essentially. And that does mean that all of the Bitcoin miners are going to look a lot less profitable in a few days. And that means that obviously Bitmain is going to have a harder time selling their Bitcoin miners. And that means that what they're going to do is try to make that up by releasing other altcoin miners, etc., to kind of make up for that, because we don't have like a halving obviously for the Dogecoin that Litecoin in this particular case already halved a little bit earlier this year. So it is kind of a good business plan, I think, overall. The post came out actually on April 16th, like I said, from Bitmain, and they announced essentially that they will have the Antminer L9 releasing in May, and it will support Litecoin, Dogecoin, and Bells mining. Remember, you can merge mine with these miners, so that does mean that you are mining multiple coins at once, typically just two. The most popular thing to mine with merge mining is going to be Dogecoin and Litecoin together, and that can increase your profitability, which is going to be something people want to look at if they are picking one of these up. Previous to this, we had the Antminer L7, which did remain profitable through the bear market, even at high energy costs, upwards of 12 to 16 cents per kilowatt hour, and that did mean that they were in high demand. They are one of the few altcoin ASIC miners that did not take a huge hit on price, unlike the Bitcoin miners, which took a huge hit on price. The Antminer L7 did not. In fact, I think up to this day, you can still find them listed at around $7,000 a piece. So they ended up being a pretty robust ASIC to have in your mining farm throughout the bear market, and kept a lot of smaller miners alive, to be honest, compared to, the GPU and the Bitcoin mining side of things, if you weren't doing things like speculative mining with the GPUs, which I cover over on sonofatech.locals.com. If you're interested in the speculative mine stuff with GPUs, that's my primary focus. Now, the actual specifications of this, I think, weren't listed on the Bitmain website or on their Twitter necessarily, but we are getting the third-party vendors to release the specifications, including BT miners as well as Viper here. And so both of these have released, the specifications that appear to be within something that's reasonable and equal to each other, meaning that we have multiple sources reporting these numbers, and then we have obviously multiple numbers to go off of to determine profitability and so on. We're basically getting a huge increase in efficiency. The power is coming down and the hash rate is going up. So we are going to see 16.2 gigahash a second, presumably, on the Antminer L9, and that is going to be at 3,260 watts of power. Now, you will need, of course, 220 to 240 volt in this particular case to run one of these miners, so keep that in mind. Not very friendly for the home miner in particular, but if you're running a mining farm or have a separate location that you're mining from, you probably already have 220 installed and ready to go. Now, the listing on BT miners is just a placeholder at $99,999. I checked a few other retailers, and it does look a little bit closer to the $17,000 mark is what we're seeing for most of the listings here. I'm going to assume that we're going to be somewhere around that mark, especially considering that the L7 is still going for $7,000. Doubling this price makes a lot of sense. So I think think really this is what we're going to be looking at for price. So we'll calculate out from here, and then we'll decide, later on if the numbers need to be adjusted. Now, at this price and the current market, it isn't looking extremely profitable from a return on investment perspective. But that's pretty much the way things are when you are kind of in this cycle, at this point in this cycle. And we're still waiting for another 6 months to a year before we really start to see a recovery from the Bitcoin halving cycle. And while this is an Antminer, I'll remind you guys that everything is based off of Bitcoin within cryptocurrency still. We haven't seen a decoupling in the likes of basically other cryptocurrencies departing from the price of Bitcoin, affecting them. So even if you are purchasing an altcoin miner, you are still beholden to the Bitcoin halving cycle regardless. So I wouldn't presume that we see a huge increase in the price of Dogecoin or Litecoin that would increase the profitability on these without an increase in Bitcoin. However, because you aren't getting the halving of Dogecoin, and that's just a consistent rate of disbursement for the block reward from Dogecoin, you also don't really have to worry about the amount of Dogecoin that you're getting, and that should mean that in theory you are good to go. A couple caveats there though is that when you see these new big miners come out, people are trying to return their investment as quickly as possible, so it can add some selling pressure after the initial launch of these, meaning that we could see selling pressure from the big miners of Dogecoin on Dogecoin and Litecoin themselves, which would drive the price down. That's something that we've seen quite a few different times across these ASIC releases, and that's just a problem with all mining in general, even on the GPU side and the FPGA side. So I did go ahead and run the numbers on MinerStat, and of course the number one thing you can mine is merge mining Litecoin with Dogecoin here, and we have the 16.2 gigahash a second in at the 3260 watts at 12 cents a kilowatt hour. That's going to put you at a $25.69 a day in profit as of right now. And that would mean theoretically that you would have a 676-day ROI, so a couple-year ROI. Obviously, a lot of things are going to affect this, but early on, this isn't going to be looking very good because remember, as more efficient miners hit the network, the difficulty on that network goes up. So while the difficulty is low with only L7s available for these particular units to be mining, maybe these are on the network. A certain amount of them, of course, are being tested by Bitmain, but a lot more will come onto the network, thereby decreasing your profitability, and you're going to have a very long return on investment from this particular hardware. The kind of standard that I try to look at, though, is from a hardware depreciation value. On ASICs, you really want to get that payoff within 5 years or before 5 years because you will be needing to get new units as equipment breaks down and so on. So keep that in mind too. If that ROI is getting too far out and you want to play it safe, you want to basically avoid that. The flip side of that, though, is that we are presumably running into a bear or a bull market here at the end of 2024 in December. And while the ROI may look like 676 days now, in December, the ROI may look like previous bull run ROIs of these things, where you could have purchased this for 16.9 and the ROI is like 90 days, right? We had crazy numbers happen, and the only way to really get into them is by purchasing these early. Now, would I purchase an Antminer L9? No, I would not personally, because I don't like purchasing ASICs that box me into a corner necessarily. And on top of that, I always think that the price of units, especially ASIC miners, come down after their initial launch, as well as you get an idea of how, robust these miners are from a survivability standpoint and reliability standpoint. So you really want to know what those are. Lots of issues, obviously, with, I think most recently, the ASICs for kaspa, where you had a lot of broken units, a lot of issues with units, and you did see those prices come down significantly, where, the KS3s and so on were going for 60 grand and are now going, for under 15 grand. And so a huge cut down in price of those. You don't want to get yourself caught into a position where you buy one of these Antminer L9s and then 4 months later, you have a reduction of cost down to like the L7 price of around the $7,000 price mark, which is probably where this settles in. My assumption would be this settles in somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000 before we really get into the next cycle. Of course, that's not financial advice. It's just looking at the way the rest of the ASICs have reacted after their initial launch and kind of what I see across the board. Anyways, the Antminer L9 is coming out. Dogecoin is obviously something that will stick around for a long time compared to other altcoins, just due to the influence of the memes, as well as, of course, the owner of X, Mr. Elon Musk himself. So, you are in a pretty good spot of being able to mine with these indefinitely, at least, compared to maybe buying an ASIC like we saw with Kadena, where you purchase it, the price floor gets completely stripped out from underneath it, and you end up not having an ability to return the investment of the initial equipment. So keep that in mind when you're taking a look at all this. I'm going to be making more videos and trying to make at least a video a day, even if it is just simple and covering something like this. So make sure you hit that like, comment, and subscribe button down below, and I will see you next Tuesday. Don't forget to check out my crypto mining e-course at sonofatech.com and check me out on locals at sonofatech.locals.com to become a part of the community.